Broadcasting from the studios of AM 950 KTNF, the progressive voice of Minnesota, this is The Gailey Show. I am your host, JP Derabagosian. We are your answer to the question, what is a queer thing I can read, watch, or go to in the Twin Cities and beyond? And we are dealing with the beyond today because my guest is not within the United States. They're in the United Kingdom. And I have been looking forward to this conversation ever since we set up the interview. So please welcome my guest today, Max Austin. Hello, Max. Welcome to The Gailey Show.
Thank you for having me. It's wonderful to be over here on the side of the pond and speaking to you this evening.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So you have a new book out. It came out just this year. It's called How Can We Be Wrong? And the first thing that kind of piqued my interest when I was looking it over, it's called bio-fictional memoir. Now, I had never heard that before. What is bio-fictional memoir?
The analogy I use, okay, you know the Titanic, the film?
Yeah.
Yeah. Sadly, we know that ship's going down at the end when we're watching it, when we start, yeah? But did Jack and Rose lie on that chaise longue together? And did she say, paint me like one of your French girls? I'm not so sure. I'm not so sure at all. So it's some facts based around some fictional elements too. But the essence of the message that's in How Can We Be Wrong is there. And it's my bio-fictional journey spanning 30 odd years of nursing and working in the health service.
Well, so tell us a little bit about that then. So your main character is also named Max and works on as a nurse, and we kind of get the whole arc of his career, right? So we start when he is training as a nurse, right?
Yes, that's right. Max starts as a cleaner in the late 80s, early 90s. Wow. Yeah. And then he gets a job as a healthcare support worker, which in the UK is an untrained nurse. And the book, through the arc, explores the importance of kindness, mental health recovery. It's about actually all my characters, whether they're gay, straight, young, old, whoever they beautifully identify, are all going through a period of recovery, a period of just being the best they can be and making the best of what life throws at them. So yes, the story's set against the late 80s, early 90s of Max's experiences coming out as a gay man in the NHS or in the health service. And what's quite interesting about the story is that I had to stop for a minute purposely while I reflected on that, is that Max was served an almost lethal combination of bigotry, hate, and just vileness from the very nursing community he represents today as a senior nurse as well. And it really nearly killed him. We talk about sort of a lot of mental health issues in the book. We talk about Max's journey. So yes, it's a story of learning. It's a story of acceptance. It's a story of just trying to navigate life.
Can you unpack that a little bit more for me about that lethal combination of bigotry and discrimination? Like, what did that mean for Max at that time period? Because I'm assuming that is stemming from the stigmatization of HIV and AIDS, or is there something else additional on top of that?
Yeah, me at the moment, just to give you some background, I'm really happy. I have a husband for over 30 years now. We've been together. We've adopted 2 children. I talk about the adoption journey in the book, and I'm a senior nurse. So I wrote this story because if it just stops one person from feeling as if there's no way out, if it just stops one person of our beautiful difference and our culture feeling as if they're standing on the edge of a cliff, okay, and life's not worth living, then that's why I wrote it, to help somebody from my personal experience. Mm-hmm. So I know I'm babbling, so I'll go back. Okay. So Max
not babbling, not at all.
Yeah. So Max is a young, naive nurse. He's a student nurse and he meets this man. He represents everything that Max isn't. He's connected in the hospital hierarchy. He's charismatic. He's handsome. And of course, Max made a beeline for him. And they struck up a relationship. And they were living together for over a year in a flat in the red light district. And it was interesting. And one day, Daniel, I call him in the book, meets Max after a late shift and says only 3 things to him. He says, I'm HIV positive. The hospital have found out. And we've just got enough time to get our belongings together because we're going into hiding. There'll be no contact with family. It's before the days of mobile phones, and I don't know what's going to happen. So off Max toddled in a state of shock with Daniel and went to a gay hotel thinking it was going to offer some purgatory. Big mistake. We're talking the late 80s and early 90s. And all that Max had was Daniel there and a big bottle of whiskey. And he lay on a hotel bed, watching the story of it unfolding in the national press and on the television, not knowing what was real and what wasn't. So Max went for a little walk in the evening to a cliff face. He was so inebriated and drunk, and he passed out and fell backwards. And when he woke up, he was in more pain, more suffering than he'd ever suffered in his entire life. To cut a long story short, eventually they returned from hiding. And I won't tell you how Max was treated or some of the words that were used to describe him on the wards, how we did it, because I think I'd be thrown off air. By the so-called nurses. And all of a sudden on the wards where he was just trying to survive, everybody had their own name, a cup with their own name on it. He wasn't allowed to have the break with them. He wasn't allowed to talk to them unless it was about a patient. He went to the canteen one evening, the main canteen, and they wouldn't serve him. So my story is a story of hope. It's a story of LGBT, the importance of kindness, truthfulness, and navigating, as I keep on saying, just being the best that you can be. And I talk about Max's journey through nursing, but actually Max's journey through life. The story ends where Max is in a really, really happy place and really fulfilled, and he's adopted 2 children who were just wonderful. And the reason why I wrote it, because we know in our community, you've only got to look at the international work of people like Stonewall, that people in our community suffer with mental health problems. Many of us use drugs or substances to manage our anxieties and our pain of rejection. Some of us have tried suicide. Yeah. So what I wanted to do is take those policies, take that sterling work off the page and bring it into reality. And if just one person reads it, and if it makes a difference to just one person, then the whole thing has been worthwhile. And you know what? I've never wrote anything before, okay, other than a clinical note. I was going to ask you about that. I've never wrote anything before in my life other than a clinical note. So this has been a new journey. But I'm so honoured and humbled by the 5-star reviews that people have left on Amazon and some of the lovely feedback that on Goodreads that people have said about the book and how it's moved them and how it's give them that sort of reflection of how they're feeling and offered that support. And what's really nice about it is that Spectrum Books, who represent me, thought that my story was so powerful that they want to do it all again with me in the spring. Yeah, so I'm just so blessed and humbled that, you know, that people are getting behind me as a newbie, you know. And it's just so, I'm just so humbling.
So take me through the writing process. Like, it's not easy to write a book. So first of all, I mean, when did you make the decision, like, I need to write this, I need to tell this story?
Well, the story's been bubbling around in me for 30 years. And I have a little bit of a rant in chapter 5 in the book, where Max steps out of the story and says things like, just for a couple of paragraphs, the importance of authenticity, the importance of walking the walk. You know, I think he says something like, he's a little bit radical, and he says, I'm pig sick of healthcare leaders talking about being kind, talking about inclusion, but without actually giving credence to it. And they're just words that mean nothing. So it's about all sort of almost like coming out again. To share this story to help other people. And I'm a big advocate of mental health support, and there's no shame in asking for help. Through my journey, as I just said, I'm trained as a nurse, and I also trained as a person-centered therapist to support others as well. It's about that, really. That's why I wrote it. Because it bubbled away for too long.
I like to use this platform as much as I can to also normalize and encourage behavioral health stuff. You know, I'm somebody who has greatly benefited from multiple therapists in my life and different protocols. And so, you know, as a person, as a queer person who has greatly benefited from behavioral health supports and treatments. Thank you for writing the book, because it is important to continue to tell that message and to make sure that people understand. And like you said, if one person, you know, reads the book, but I imagine more than one person is reading the book. Tell me about then that process of writing as it was bio-fictional. Like, how did you go through there and say, you know, obviously, I imagine that a lot of it you were able to describe because you were there. But how did you, in terms of the own memoir type of stuff, decide what to include and what not to include? Because that can be really tricky about, you know, when you're not just writing fiction, you're like, here, I'm going to show my life. I'm going to include part of my life in this.
I write about the good, the bad, and the ugly of NHS staff and the NHS experience or healthcare experience in the wider context of the world. And the first thing to answer that question is that the stories, the patient stories, I can't write a book about healthcare provision without talking about patients, because without them, I'm nothing. Yeah, they're the reason why all of those stories are loosely based on biofiction, because I'm working actively as a senior nurse, and confidentiality and professional regulations and standards, you know, I wouldn't compromise that. So that's the first thing in that journey. The second thing is that it's the essence of the emotion that my characters are portraying. So, for example, Bren, there's a character named Bren. She's a lady in her late 50s. And book 2, she's getting older, and that it's the essence of that person, of what I'm trying to portray. And but so pretty much lots of it is real, and lots of the people are real in the story. It may be there's a character named Maria. It may be who's a bit of an Ursula character in book 1. She's not nice, but she may be a combination of a couple of people who you come across to get the essence of the story or the message that I'm saying. I use music a lot as well, the reference, to the timing. Yeah, that's quite moving. Yeah, and there's a drag queen as well, Miss Nancy Eclair, and she's just wonderful as well. Yeah, to give a whole flavour of her performing, because I don't know if you can pick up from the tone. Yes, there's some serious triggers in the book, and I don't shy away from them, but there's also a lot of humour, because that's what life's about. It's balance, and there's a lot of happiness as well. I won't spoil it for anybody who wants to read it, but the whole last chapter is just a celebration, and you find out in the very last line why it's called "How Can We Be Wrong?" I've just got a copy there. How can we be wrong? Okay, in the very last line in the book. And the next one is called "That Is What We Are." Yeah, so just a little hint, just a little teaser. It may be something to do with a certain very famous song by a certain very famous country and western performer, who is renowned for supporting our community. And, and talk about drag queens. If I wasn't a girl, I would have been a drag queen, is one of her favourite lines that she says, you know what I'm hinting at? Yeah. So, so there is a lots of humour along with the sadness as well to take it through. My drag queen performs as that very famous singer, one of the routines. Yeah. And she takes through.
I love that.
As she goes through, yeah.
So I love asking writers, because we also have a lot of writers that listen to this show. What was your writing process like?
My writing process it's just cathartic. I write down, it might start with a song. It might start with a feeling. It might start with, I don't know, where am I at that stage? And I'll just write something down, something that I see, and that turns into an arc, which turns into a character, which turns into a paragraph, which turns into the essence of the story. I draw from everywhere, and, I'm like a sponge. Somebody said I'm like a sponge that needs a good wringing out. So So my writing process is eclectic, to say the least. It could be a walk in the park that triggers something with a dog. Obviously, there's lots of bio-fiction in the book. Lots of fact. So it's a lot of reflection as well, of putting myself back in those scenarios, and nobody should still taste sea salt on the breath if they're stressed, for just wanting to live the best life. Some of
and
the
it sounds like
messages.
This whole book. Sorry about that. It sounds like the whole book of the writing process has been really cathartic for you.
Absolutely. Not re-triggering, okay, because, this is coming from a place of healing, okay. But it is very cathartic to reflect upon your life and where you've been and where you are now. To sound like a bad country and western song.
So, speaking of reflection, I imagine that the NHS of 1990 is very different than the NHS of 2024. And I imagine also for, Yanks, Americans who are reading this, they're going to think, oh my God, this is so much better in some regards than the US system. But tell me a little bit about the positive changes that you have ultimately seen the NHS taking towards better inclusion. Like you were talking about your narrator, Max, stepping out and saying, I'm tired of healthcare leaders not doing the walk. What are those things that the NHS has done that you're like, let's celebrate that?
I'm absolutely humbled and honoured to be part of the NHS, okay, and be a nurse all this time. It's a privilege to step into somebody's life when they need it the most, and be there and go on that journey with them. And part of that is with the staff themselves. Some of the inclusion policies are just really, really thorough, looking at the research, looking at how we can change to make our society more inclusive, reaching out to people who perhaps don't access healthcare in the traditional way as well. And also what's really important to me, and I'm a big advocate, is finding your tribe. So if you look at staff networks that are out there now, I'm an active member of our LGBTQIA community. Also that partnership work as well, finding your tribe, the partnership work. Through some of this work, I'm supporting other sort of charities as well around that, and that co-production work. So there has been strives. There has been, the emphasis, and it's certainly not where it was 30 years ago. However, this is a double-edged sword.
I was going to ask, there was a follow-up.
So however, okay, things aren't perfect internationally. And we're only just like where we were before, looking at Stonewall or the NHS Confederation. Layla McKay did a big piece of research that turned into a book called the Rainbow Ceiling, how people of difference and our LGBT community just don't get on. Okay, so there's still work to do. So my lived experience, because there's nothing more powerful than lived experience, actually is there to support the policies of why it's important to be kind, why it's important to have civility, why it's important to be respectful to people, and why it's important to treat people as individuals. Because let me assure you, none of that is happening on my watch when I'm at work. I bang the drum of inclusion.
I imagine that you do. You're a very strong advocate for that. You all had a very big, we're also, a progressive radio station. So you all had a massive election in July, and Labor swept the board. So are you excited or tentatively hopeful that with a new Labor government that there's going to be greater positive queer changes to the NHS system?
Well, it's early days, really, if I'm honest with you, JP. Ask me in a few months' time when things have settled in around that. Let's see what happens. Still early days. They're still sort of finding. We've had a Conservative government for many, many years in this country. My book is set in the 1990s, where we talk about Reagan and I talk about Mrs. Thatcher. And that I actually take the mickey out of Mrs. Thatcher quite a lot, bless her. Sitting in bed with Dennis, writing her plans for reformation, with the curlers in her hair and a hairnet. So let's just see how things turn out, shall we?
That's fair. So how do folks connect with you to buy your book? And also, you're a speaker as well. So folks wanted to connect with you to bring you in as a speaker to their organization. How do folks go about doing that?
I would absolutely. You can reach out to me through the socials on... Excuse me. Thank you for giving me the opportunity for a quick plug here, JP.
Always.
www.maxaustinauthor.com is my website. Please stop by, have a look. I post regularly on all the socials. I put one on this evening. Some of them are fun. Some of them are just silly. Some of them are serious. Some of them are about the book. Some of them are about my family. Just for you to get to know me. Oh, on the website as well. Please sign up because I'll be developing a newsletter as well. I do some stuff. Yeah, I'll be developing a newsletter around that. As I said, there's another book coming out. Okay. Google Max Austin, you'll find me. .com and on all. Please do so. And also, I'm thinking on my feet, I'd be really, really grateful if you'd have a look at Amazon and have a look at the reviews for How Can We Be Wrong? And on Goodreads as well. I've just been blessed by everybody's outpouring of support.
That's wonderful. Well, congratulations on the book, Austin.
Thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure. I could speak to you all night.
Oh, yeah. I think I just called you Austin. Max.
That's okay.
All right. All right.
I'll answer to anything.
Everybody, thank you for joining us here on The Gaily Show. Follow us on our Instagram channel at @the_Gaily Show for ticket giveaways for shows coming up here in the Twin Cities. Otherwise, have a great weekend, and we will see you next Saturday.